Canadians want to help the Afghan people, but is the military the right way to do it? Is sending tanks and smart bombs the way to do it? Well, thank you all very much, and thanks for coming out on a night like this. There's a lot of concern out there. There's a lot of worry and a lot of feeling that we're being manipulated somehow. That people feel that they're being manipulated by a new kind of politics of fear that's being used in this country to push people in a direction where in their gut and in their heart they don't want to go. And we're going to talk a little bit about that this evening. Not only is the book out right now, Missile Defense Round 1, but also you may have seen in the media a new report that I wrote for the Council of Canadians called Marching Orders, which talks about the current situation in Afghanistan and our evolving role as a nation in the world. So, Marching Orders, there's a few copies here, and it is available at www.canadians.ca as well. Tonight with Canada's role in the world and our defense policy and what's happening. Some of those things that we hear all the time in the media, over and over again. But let's put some of that to the test. So here's our first one. Okay, so this is urban legend number 1. Nobody does UN peacekeeping these days, so Canada doesn't need to contribute UN troops anymore. Is this a fact or a myth? Well, I want to share with you a chart, some research from Professor Walter Dorn that we've included in this report that says something quite different. This chart that we're seeing here tracks UN peacekeeping, the level of UN peacekeeping from 1990 up until the current date of 2006. All right? So here you see, this is the number of UN peacekeepers deployed in the world during that time period. In the post-Cold War period, there was a huge increase of peacekeepers around the world, up to almost 80,000 at its peak, of blue beret military and police doing the work of UN-led peacekeeping operations. There was a decline in the 1990s, in the mid-1990s, as you can see, mostly after Rwanda and that dark period of peacekeeping. But then, in the late 1990s, around 2000, you see what happens. The demand for peacekeeping grows. More missions are added on. The UN is struggling, actually, to keep up with the demand that's on it. UN troops, they don't have their own standing army. They rely on countries to contribute troops to UN peacekeeping. And so the numbers increased and increased until right now, we're just below the peak of 80,000. And in fact, this is from August of 2006. I just received an email from Professor Walter Dorn, who teaches at the Canadian Forces College, by the way, in Toronto. He teaches Canadian military personnel. He sent an email to me today saying that as of the end of October, UN peacekeeping has broken the record right now. There are more than 80,000 blue helmet soldiers. So peacekeeping now is more active than it's ever been. Now, what's Canada's contribution to this? Where does Canada stand in peacekeeping? And I want to share with you this next slide, again from Professor Dorn's research. This ranks Canadian personnel contributed to the UN peacekeeping operations. And as you see, in the early 1990s again, we had that same spike before. Canada was a major contributor. Up to almost 3,500 soldiers were sent on blue helmet peacekeeping missions around the world in the early 1990s. It declined as overall UN peacekeeping declined, as you remember in the previous slide. But look what happened. In the late 1990s, when UN peacekeeping started going on the rise again, here we are, we're just continuing on. This is the 500 line. Less than 500 until... hello, there we are, hello. So, 3,500 almost there, down to 56. 56, so we're down to 56 blue helmet troops from a high of almost 3,500 today. If you look at it another way, in terms of contributing to UN peacekeeping missions, the UN keeps very good records of this. You can go and look at this yourself. This is available on the UN website. Back in 1991, what was Canada's ranking amongst all contributors to UN peacekeeping? We were number one. We were the number one contributor of troops for UN peacekeeping missions around the world. Throughout most of the 1990s, we stayed relatively high within the top 10, but then the big drop comes in the late 1980s until by today, there's a little spike there. We're down in the low 30s, and at the end of this study in August, we were down to 52. 52. 52 of 97 countries contributing UN troops. So really, Canada has abandoned UN peacekeeping. It's pretty clear. Even though polling has shown, even as late as last fall, that 70% of Canadians feel that UN peacekeeping is a defining characteristic of Canada. They feel that this is a main role and our greatest contribution to the world. Let's look at it another way in terms of dollars. For every $10 spent on Canadian missions abroad, how much was spent on UN-led missions? Well, in 1992 and 1993, we were spending $9.27. So almost all of every $10 was spent on a UN-led mission. Fast forward to 2004-05, for every $10, how much was spent on UN-led missions? 31 cents. 31 cents. Barely anything at all. And if we compare it even more, the government just put out their new estimates on spending in Afghanistan and UN. So the new military spending estimates were just released by the UN just a few weeks ago. So let's have a comparison. Military spending on Afghanistan versus UN peacekeeping in 2006-07. The war in Afghanistan will cost Canada $1.6 billion. UN peacekeeping, $6 million. 233 times smaller will be the amount that we spend on UN peacekeeping. And interestingly enough, the government issued its estimates on the cost of the war in Afghanistan earlier this year, in early September, and pegged it at $1.4 billion. And then within about 6 weeks, they had to go back and increase it and add another $200 million onto the mission. A lot of it was as a result of the decision to send those Leopard battle tanks to Afghanistan, which cost a couple of $100 million. And as you may have heard in the news, where last night, Canada is now considering buying new shells that go in these new howitzers that we bought that cost $150,000 each. How many nurses' salaries is that in each shell? That's at least 1.5 social housing units in each shell that we're firing. And we just fire countless numbers of these in Afghanistan. And it's the latest piece of equipment, and it's lining the pockets of Raytheon Corporation, is what it is, because it's a brand new piece of equipment. So really, you can see that we've abandoned UN peacekeeping. But I just want to share with you some of the research. And one of the other arguments that we find out there is that UN peacekeeping isn't effective anymore. That's the reason Canada doesn't do it, that it doesn't work. Again, let's put it to the test. The RAND Corporation, a very conservative American defense think tank in the U.S., was asked to look at UN missions and compare them to U.S. missions. And this is what the RAND Corporation found in 2005. Among those studied, 2/3 of UN nation-building operations can be counted as successful at this time, compared with only half of U.S. missions. 2/3 UN missions are successful, only 50% of U.S. missions are considered successful. Within limits, UN peacekeeping is a highly efficient means of placing post-conflict societies on the path to enduring peace and democratic government, and the most efficient form of international intervention so far documented. Now, this is not the left-leaning Polaris Institute study I'm quoting here, okay? This is the RAND Corporation, okay? This is a very conservative think tank in the U.S. that has done this determination of peacekeeping.